fine. I kind of want both of them up. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is balance. I'm going to double up. 2 nitrogens, 2 times 3, 3 times 2. So I'm balancing, and that's an understood 1. If I have 50 grams of nitrogen, I'm going to set this up. And nitrogen is N2. So that's what's written in my reaction. So it's actually 28 grams for 1 mole. Now that I'm in grams of or moles of nitrogen, I can convert to moles of ammonia. So it's 1 mole of N2 to 2 moles of NH3. This is the only step that I'm using the coefficients. I'm only using those coefficients when I'm going from one thing to another in the reaction. I'm going to go all the way to grams. Theoretical yield typically means grams. You'd have to do it in the next step anyway. And this is just 1 mole of NH3. I'm not using the 2 here. This is just the molar mass, which is the mass of 1 mole of NH3. So it's 14 plus 3. It's about 17. So this is how much I'm making to start with. So 50 times 2 times 17. And then divide by 28. I get 60.7 grams of NH3. My other amount is 12 grams of hydrogen. And it's not H, it's H2. That's what's written in the reaction. So that means 1 mole of H2 is 2.016 or so, excuse me, grams of hydrogen. Now that I'm in moles of hydrogen, now I can convert from one thing in the reaction to another. And this is where I use those coefficients. This is the only step that I use when I'm going from moles of one thing to moles of another in the reaction. And then I'm going to convert to grams just because I want the same unit to compare. If you stopped in moles at both, you can still identify which is limiting. But I'm going to have to go to grams eventually. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm going to get grams of NH3. So now it's 12 times 2 times 17. 12 times 2 times 17. And then if I divide by these two values, if I want to multiply them in one step, I do have to use parentheses. And I get 68 grams. Okay, I thought that was a little high, but I guess not. Okay, so my theoretical yield is the smallest. Whether it's moles or grams, the smallest amount. So in this case, it's 60.7 grams. Whatever I started with to get the theoretical yield is my limiting reactant. So I pick the smaller number, I backtrack, whatever I started with is my limiting reactant. So this one is 60.7 grams of ammonia. My theoretical, or my limiting reactant, my limiting reagent is N2. And then the percent yield is just how much you got out of how much was expected. So you're told in the problem, let's say, hypothetically, you went to the lab and you conducted this experiment. You only made 13 grams, even though ideally you would have made the maximum amount, 60.7 grams. Times 100%, we get about 21.4%, which actually isn't bad for a synthesis reaction. Okay, so this is our percent yield, and it's just how much of our expected calculated amount did we make.